Alright guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to do part 1 of our mental health series that I am doing. And so we are going to start with anxiety, and this is a huge topic for me, to be honest with you. I really don't know where to begin with it, just because it's something I've dealt with for so many years of my life. And I had my first anxiety attack when I was 13 or 14 years old. I am now 30, and since that point I have struggled on and off, but anxiety has definitely been a part of my life, whether minimally or majorly for all of these years. So, you know, the thing about anxiety, and the same goes with depression, is it really does come and go. And at this point, I'm happy to say that I have been completely medication free for about 7 years. Yeah, it's been about 7 years now, and it's amazing. And so, as someone that has suffered with super severe anxiety, I can tell you that it is definitely more than possible to overcome and to live with it and deal with it. So I'm just gonna dive right in. So when I first was diagnosed with anxiety, I had my first panic attack. I didn't know what was happening to me. I had no idea. I was sitting in class in the 8th grade, and I was really nervous because the teacher I had at the time, she would always call on us without us raising our hand. She was one of those teachers that would like call you out and be like, so and so, what's the answer? And so I sat in her class, and I was always so nervous. And so shortly before class was over, all of a sudden, like, my heart started racing. I started feeling like the walls were closing in, and almost like I was starting to have trouble breathing. I was just freaking out. So at this point, I raised my hand. I was like, I gotta go to the nurse. And the teacher was like, okay, go ahead. So I walk quickly to the nurse's office. I tell her what's going on. She doesn't even tell me what's going on with me. She's just like, oh, okay, just sit here for a minute. And so I sit there for a minute, and then about 10 minutes later, I felt perfectly fine, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to class now. And she's like, okay, bye. And she didn't even tell me what was going on with me, which she totally should have. So when my mom came in to pick me up from school that day, I told her what was going on. And that's when she was like, oh, it's an anxiety attack. Welcome to the club. It runs in the family. So, you know, the thing about things like anxiety and depression, and with any mental health condition, they can definitely run in the family, but just because it does genetically run in your family does not necessarily mean it's going to happen to you. But honestly, it's just, I credit anxiety and depression and PTSD too. I credit most of these things to just simply the world that we live in, simply the environment that we live in. And this is the thing. I do not know one person that I have ever met in my life that has legitimately been able to say that they've never had anxiety or depression or both. Most people have had both. At some point in your life, I've said this before, at some point in your life, no matter who you are, no matter how great you think your mental health is, you will experience some form of anxiety, depression, or both, and or PTSD. It's just part of life. And there are so many people that deal with this. And, you know, in my opinion, I'm not a doctor, obviously, but I don't feel like these things really need formal diagnosing. I don't feel like you should just run up to the doctor, you know, if you feel like you're anxious or depressed. Now, the only thing I can say is if you haven't really experienced it before and it's something that's new to you, then I do recommend, you know, going to see a doctor just to get, like, you know, a basic well checkup, maybe get like some basic blood work done, things of that nature, and just make sure that, hey, there's nothing going on. And I know when I first started having problems, I had all kinds of tests run because I was having a lot of heart palpitations and things like that. So I had like an EKG and some things, you know, some different tests just to make sure that my heart was okay, to make sure everything was okay. And of course it was. And, you know, the scary thing about anxiety, you know, especially if you have panic disorder, is that you will feel, you know, when you're having a panic attack, like, it literally feels like you're going to die. Like, you literally think, okay, this is it. So, I mean, it's such an intense thing. And honestly, I'm going to do more than one video on it just because because, like I say, I don't know where to begin. This is just part of my story. But I took medication for like the first year after I was diagnosed with anxiety. So then I got off the medication. So then about a year later, I got back on it because I was having problems again, because it kind of relapsed. And I took it again for, say, another 6 months to a year. Then I got off of it. So this happened about 3 times before I finally said, okay, I'm done. And I think I wound up taking something else when I was in my early 20s. I want to say about 21, maybe 22. And I was on it briefly at that period of time as well. So I'm not going to really get into my depression story during this video because I want to focus more on anxiety. So yeah, I was on and off medication, and I always did very, very low dose. I always recommend starting with a very low dose, because the thing is, if you're going to go on the medication, and I was not aware of this when I was on the medication, there's so much, like there are so many side effects that go with the medication, and personally, I don't recommend getting on it unless it's an emergency and you literally just cannot cope and cannot function, period. If you can deal with it naturally, if you can handle dealing with the anxiety without medication, please do, because I will tell you, I experienced a lot of very unpleasant side effects, and I know a lot of other people that have as well, people that have become addicted. These are very habit forming, and the thing is, you have to understand that it's just artificial serotonin, basically. And so over time, if you take it for a long period of time, it's not going to be good for your brain, because your brain has to learn how to produce more serotonin and more of those chemicals. So it's very interesting how it works. But now, one thing I will say is always a good idea is to have something, if you have really, really bad anxiety and you know that you need something for those times when you're just extremely anxious, I would recommend, you can ask your doctor for something like Xanax or I can't remember, mostly like benzodiazepines. There are other things you can get. One time I had a doctor prescribe me a prescription antihistamine. I don't remember what it was called. It started with an H. And that kind of helped me a lot, but it didn't really make me drowsy. So the thing about the anxiety medications is they make you drowsy, especially if you're taking the ones for, like clonazepam, because basically those are also used to treat epilepsy and seizures and stuff like that. So essentially, it's going to really knock you out. So I don't like to take any of that stuff, and I never did, and it makes it really hard to function if you take something like that. So secondly, when it comes to the everyday medication, like the SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, those are going to do the same thing. I noticed every time I would take that medication, I would have considerably less energy. I would lose my appetite. I would have a hard time, and another thing too is they can really mess with your sex drive too, like your libido. And obviously when I was younger, I didn't have to worry about that, but when I was older, I definitely noticed that. And it can cause things like, sexual side effects like vaginal dryness. It can cause these issues in women and men. So it's just a lot of different side effects to deal with, honestly. And then you always run the risk of it making the problem worse, which is very rare, but it can happen. So I just don't recommend taking it from personal experience if you don't have to. So, I've struggled with anxiety so bad, I tell you. I think when I was about 25, I had just had, my first child. He was 8 or 9 months old at the time. I think he was about 9 or 10 months old, actually. And it was Christmas Eve. I was so stressed out. I had so much going on, and I was dealing with really severe anxiety. I was driving, and I ended up having a panic attack that was so bad that I had to pull over and call an ambulance because I was so freaked out. So they actually took me to the hospital, but then when I got to the hospital, they literally didn't give me anything at all. Any kind of medication, anything to calm me down, nothing. And I was so mad. I was like, why the heck am I here? So the thing is, when it comes to stuff like this, you really want to prevent the attack before it happens. If you can't, then you just have to deal with it, obviously. So, things like breathing techniques, breath work, things like essential oils, all this stuff helps. I have found that things like frankincense and lavender, lemongrass, essential oils on like kind of like a wet rag, and you can put it like around your neck or like breathe into it with your face. I also recommend the paper bag technique. So you know, actually keep a paper bag with me at all times in my car too, just in case it happens. So you breathe into the paper bag. And the more you research and the more you find different techniques that you can use, the better you will feel. And just carry these things with you when you're out and about, so that you know, hey, if something happens, I have this and I have that. And you know, it can be medication if you want it to be. Some people say that Benadryl helps them if they take some kind of something to make them drowsy, or like an over-the-counter sleeping pill. Some people say that that will help. That does not work for me. So there are a lot of things. And then, you know, you've got the basic everyday anxiety that just kind of wears on you and, you know, just makes you feel nervous, makes you feel uptight. And I do struggle with that a lot. I very rarely will still have a full-blown panic attack, but at points in my life, it was an everyday thing for me at points in my life. So, you know, I think the thing is, you have to evaluate life circumstances too, and just be like, okay, what can I change and what can I not change? And with what I can't change, how can I navigate to where I can make this situation better to deal with? So that's a huge thing, and that goes along with depression too, but that's for another day. So I'm going to dive into a few of the natural remedies that you can use. And I will also say that the more experience you have with anxiety, the more comfortable you're going to be living with it and dealing with it, just because you've experienced so much of it and you know how to handle it, you know what works and doesn't work for you. So one thing that I do, and I know a lot of people won't agree with me, but I kind of use alcohol in small amounts to help with the situation. So let's say, for example, I start to feel like I've got a panic attack coming on, and you know what that feels like if you've ever experienced that. So let's say you're just feeling like that and you start to feel it. Okay, well, as soon as I feel it, I will go ahead and have like a glass of wine. I try to go with, you know, something like a glass of red wine or maybe a champagne, something that's not going to be so hard. I mean, if all you have is like vodka or liquor or whatever, you know, I mean, you can use a shot of that. But I don't recommend drinking a whole lot, because you don't want to make the situation worse. And I know for me, I've actually never been drunk, but if I drink too much alcohol, like if I drink 2 or 3 drinks, I will start to feel weird, like, and it gives me more anxiety. So I can only really drink about 1 drink, and I'm kind of a lightweight when it comes to alcohol. So yeah, I'll just drink something like a glass of wine, or, you know, something that's going to be healthier and natural. I'm really not a fan of vodka and things like that. Wine coolers are kind of okay depending on what it is, but I like stuff that has all natural ingredients. And, you know, sometimes I might have a shot of whiskey, brandy, something like that. So, and then usually that will keep me from having the panic attack. Now, if you get to the point that you have the panic attack, you can still, you know, have yourself your drink while you're having it, if you're able to. But anyways, the key really is to prevent it from happening before it happens. So you can do that with different things. And like I say, I know a lot of people won't agree with me on the alcohol, but hey, that's just what I do, and it's what works for me. And I make sure that I always have a sealed up bottle of wine, because you don't want to have like an open container in your car or anything like that. But I keep a sealed up bottle of wine in my trunk, just in case I ever am out and about and I start freaking out, you know, because you just really never know. And if you're like me and you've struggled with this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The more prepared you are, the better. So we talked about essential oils. That's another big thing. Essential oils are a major help, especially lavender would be the number one, and chamomile. You can use things like anxiety teas that have lavender, chamomile herbs, herbal poultices, things like that. And you know, taking care of your physical health is always going to be a huge important issue as well. I'm talking about things like meditation, breath work. I do Qigong every day with my workout, so that helps me a lot. Exercising, taking walks, and, you know, making sure your hormones are in check, trying to keep your hormones as balanced as possible, and things of that nature. So getting yourself into nature, getting outdoors, that's going to be a huge help as well. Sunlight, huge thing. Supplementation, you want to take things like not only a multivitamin. I always recommend people take a multivitamin, a probiotic, and then also take different supplements, whatever is going on with your body. Like, let's say, for example, you're like me and you have a thyroid condition, so you would take, something for thyroid support. Or say you're having hormonal female issues and your hormones are imbalanced, you might take some different herbs like some chasteberry, some black cohosh, something like that. So whatever problem you're experiencing for your own body. So with anxiety, for example, you could take chamomile. You could do, I think there's one that's called kava is a good one. You always want to talk to your doctor first, and if you're taking any kind of medications, definitely do not attempt this without talking to your doctor first. So there are other herbs, like you can do lavender tea. You can actually do essential oils very, very minimally in teas and things like that. So there really is, honestly, there's so much that you can do. And I utilize infrared therapy. I utilize all the kinds of wellness machines that I have. I do 30 minutes a day where I call it my healing time. And I will do 30 minutes on my chi machine or my infrared dome. I have an infrared heating pad, or I will do a detox foot bath. Sometimes I'll use 2 at the same time. So I always take that time. And then I will also exercise every day for at least 30 minutes, bare minimum. Usually my total is closer to an hour between walking, stretching, and the actual main part of the workout. So eating healthy is a big thing. Getting all your nutrients, detoxing, getting rid of the toxins in your body, all of these things. And you can still do all of these things and still really struggle with anxiety, and that's okay. And I think the most important thing to understand, taking from all of this, is that there's nothing wrong with you if you have anxiety. And I really do get frustrated with the stigma with mental health. I get frustrated when people are like, oh, I've been diagnosed with this condition and my doctor says I have this and it'll never go away and I'll always have this. And the thing is, once you have anxiety, like clinically, yes, they're going to tell you that you can't cure it, and it is something that you can get rid of. It is something you can cure, and it's always going to be with you to an extent. You're going to know what it feels like, and you may always struggle with it from time to time, but it's not a condition that you have to live with for the rest of your life. It's just not. And it's so frustrating how the doctors, they say these things, and just know that there's always a way out, and you don't have to live like this forever. So, like I say, I mean, for me, it comes and goes. I'll have harder times and I'll have better times, but I think the initial part of when you start having anxiety, most of this will usually happen to people in early adulthood, like in their early 20s. It might happen in your mid 20s. For a lot of people, it happens in the teens, in the preteens, even as children nowadays we're seeing. So more than ever, nutrition, exercise, sunlight, supplementation. There are all kinds of anxiety, adrenal support supplements you can take to help you out. B vitamins are a huge thing. B6 and B12 especially. Taking in lots of those. Omega-3s, all the omega fatty acids have been shown, fish oils, to promote anxiety relief as well. So like I say, there are so many things I could not even begin to tell you that you could do for your anxiety. So just do your research and see what you can find out. Experiment until you find what works for you. And the longer you cope with it, the better you get at coping with it. So just keep all this in mind. Just do the best that you can. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to add. So yeah, I mean, I notice, like, whenever I am more sleep deprived, I also tend to get a lot more anxiety. And I've had exhaustion related panic attacks in the past. So that can definitely happen. So I recommend, everybody's different. If you're the type of person that can't function on a small amount of sleep, then you need to make sure that you're getting enough sleep, however much that is for you, because every person's different. I do not go by the whole 7-8 hours thing. I don't think that's true for everybody by any means. I do not believe that. I think for some people it is true. I think for some people they even need like 9 or 10, some people. But for me, I'm more of like a 6 or 6.5. So, you know, some nights I don't always get that. Some nights I only get 4. You know, I'll get anywhere from 4, 4.5, or 5. You know, so it just happens. I mean, when I was younger, I had so much insomnia and so much trouble sleeping that I would go, you know, some nights I had occasional nights I wouldn't sleep at all. Occasional nights I might sleep 1 or 2 hours. And fortunately, it's gotten a little bit better in my the older that I've gotten, and over the past few years, especially over the past couple of years, I've gotten to a point where I can do more of like, you know, I usually almost never get less than 4 hours of sleep a night. But when my second son was very small, when he was a baby, he had a really hard time sleeping. So a lot of nights I would only get 3 or 3.5 hours of sleep. So situations like that, you just want to do the best you can. Obviously, if you're a parent and you might not always get that much sleep, you might have a whole lot going on in your life, you might be like me and struggle with insomnia, but my point is just do the best you can. And if you can't sleep, just lay there and rest, and don't think about it, don't worry about it, because rest is still going to help you. Studies have also shown that meditation is actually more restorative than sleep, so you can always meditate as well. Lay there, rest, meditate, whatever. So all of these things, just taking into consideration and just thinking about each area of your life and your overall health will help a whole lot. So, and I have so much I could tell you about anxiety, but, you know, ultimately, I think that's all I have to say for right now. But in the future, we will definitely dive in more. I'm going to do quite a few videos, I think, for the mental health series. I think I'm also going to do one on insomnia, at least one. So definitely stay tuned. The next time I will be diving into depression and how I've coped with that and how I deal with that, and that's a very powerful story. And I can't wait to share more about the PTSD as well. But yeah, just to recap for the anxiety, I hope that this can help. I also want to mention CBD is a really good alternative as well for anxiety, which most of us know this, but like I say, there are so many things. This just barely scratches the surface. So with that being said, I will see you in the next video.